Hello everyone, and today's video, the name of the video is Coaches. We're going to be taking a look at the coaching landscape in the NHL. We're going to take a look at all the coaching moves that happened in season, all the coaching moves that happened after the regular season ended, and we're also going to be looking at any other sort of movements that happened from our past couple of days. We'll get to all of the coaching updates from our past couple of days and how it's sort of affecting the NHL landscape right now, coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do so if you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below listing all discussed in today's video. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, so it really is appreciated. So in today's video, we are looking at NHL head coaches. So we saw a couple of NHL head coaches get fired in season. Some hires were interim head coaches, some hires were permanent head coaches. We'll look at all the in-season stuff first, and then we'll take a look at what's happened so far in the offseason and sort of view the landscape in the NHL when it comes to the coaching market as it sits right now. So the first head coaching move we saw in season was with the Boston Bruins, as after a poor start in their first 20 games, they fired head coach Jim Montgomery and they hired interim head coach Joe Sacco. So they didn't hire a full-time head coach at that time. They hired interim head coach Joe Sacco. So the plan was to see how Sacco did throughout the regular season, and then at the end of the season, see if they would try and bring back Sacco or try and do a full coaching search. The next coaching move that was made in season was the St. Louis Blues, as they fired Drew Bannister, who hadn't even been there for a full season, because they saw the opportunity to hire former now Bruins head coach Jim Montgomery. So because Montgomery was available, the Blues really saw a fit with him. So they fired Bannister, who had only been there for the last half of the previous year and then the first half of this past year. And they bring in Jim Montgomery. Now they signed Montgomery to a longer term deal, so he wasn't an interim head coach. The Blues found a permanent option. So they hired Montgomery, and he was then the head coach of the St. Louis Blues. After that, the Chicago Blackhawks fired Luke Richardson after I think it was 1.5 or 2.5 seasons under the bench as the Blackhawks head coach. And they brought in interim head coach Sorensen. Now, Anders Sorensen was, I think, one of the first, if not the first, Swedish head coach in the NHL, which was very interesting out there, but he was an interim head coach. So similar to Boston, the Hawks would see how Sorensen did throughout the regular season, and then once again reevaluate once their season ended. The Detroit Red Wings would be the next team that made coaching movement, as they fired Derek Lalonde, who had been there for a couple of years now, and brought in Todd McLellan as their new head coach. But just like St. Louis, McLellan was not an interim head coach. He was a long-term fit. I think they signed to like a 3 or 4 year deal. So McLellan's going to be there for quite some time. The Red Wings head coaching position doesn't need to be worried about at this point, as McLellan is going to be there for the next little while. And then the last head coaching move we saw in season was with the Philadelphia Flyers, as they fired coach John Tortorella after I think it was 2.5 seasons behind the bench for the Philadelphia Flyers, and then they brought in Brad Shaw as their interim head coach. So once again, they're getting someone who could potentially work for the last 2 games of the regular season, because that was a fire that only happened with like 15 games left in the regular season, and then they're going to go through a full head coaching search in the offseason. So at the end of the regular season, there were 5 coaching changes in the NHL. That's Boston, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, and Philly. Now Detroit and St. Louis, after hiring McLellan and Montgomery, didn't need new head coaches. Those guys were long-term options. But the Bruins with Sacco, the Hawks with Sorensen, and the Flyers with Shaw were all on interim head coach options. So they either needed to extend those guys or go through full coaching options. Then right after the season ended, we saw a whole slew more of coaches being fired. First, it was in Anaheim, as they fired Greg Cronin after his not abysmal season, because the Ducks didn't really have an overly bad season, but they didn't make the playoffs again, so the Ducks obviously felt like they need to go in a different direction. The Seattle Kraken fired Dan Bylsma, and the New York Rangers fired Peter Laviolette, both after only 1 season behind the bench. So after Bylsma took over last year in the offseason, and Laviolette took over in New York last year in the offseason, they both only survived 1 season. The Kraken definitely had much of a down year, and the Rangers didn't make it back to the playoffs, so I can see why they got fired. But still, it's interesting to note that both those guys only survived 1 year, and then they got fired. So the Ducks fired Cronin, the Kraken fired Bylsma, and the Rangers fired Laviolette. Then the Canucks, who had Rick Tocchet enter the final year of his contract, tried to offer him a really lucrative deal and would have made one of the highest paid head coaches, but he turned it down. He seems to be wanting to go somewhere more eastern, closer to home, according to Canucks president of hockey ops Jim Rutherford, and him and the Canucks parted ways. So it wasn't a fire, but Tocchet will not be brought back by the Vancouver Canucks. So even though they did really want to keep him, Tocchet winds up leaving. So the Canucks are now without a head coach. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins fired Mike Sullivan after his long tenure with Pittsburgh, because he was the second longest tenured head coach in the NHL, only behind John Cooper. So the fact that he got fired is insane. So he shot up to the best candidate out of a lot of teams. So interesting note there. But after the season ended, we have seen 5 coaches get fired, as Cronin in Anaheim, Bylsma in Seattle, Sullivan in Pittsburgh, Laviolette in New York Rangers, and then not really fired, but just parted ways with Tocchet in Vancouver. So that left Vancouver, New York Rangers, Pittsburgh, Seattle, and Anaheim, all without head coaches, as well as Bruins, Hawks, and Flyers either having to find new head coaches or sign their interns to new deals. So that left 8 head coaching vacancies in the NHL. That's a quarter of the league. That's insane. Now, since all of those moves have happened, there has been one head coaching hiring, as after he became available, he was the top candidate for a lot of teams. The Rangers saw fit to sign him before he was snatched up by anyone else, as the Rangers signed Mike Sullivan to a multi-year contract to be their new head coach, making him one of the highest paid coaches in the NHL. So interesting note there has been a lot of talk over the past year or two that if the Penguins were to move on from Sullivan, that the Rangers were a very likely landing spot. So interesting note there, but the Rangers do now have their new bench boss and former rival Mike Sullivan. So that's a very solid hire in my opinion for the Rangers. Sort of fits what they need in a head coach. But when it comes to the other 7 head coaching vacancies, there have been no finalists or no hires at this point. So the Bruins still need to make a decision on Sacco or go in another direction. The Hawks need to make a decision on Sorensen or go in another direction. Flyers need to make a decision on Shaw or go in another direction. And then the Ducks, Kraken, Penguins, and Canucks all still need new head coaches. Now, some linkages for some of these head coaching options. I've heard a guy like Rick Tocchet be mentioned to one of the Pennsylvania teams, whether it be Philly or Pittsburgh. Seems like he wants to go closer to the Eastern Conference and still want to coach, but maybe somewhere closer to home in the East. So there's been a lot of linkage to Philadelphia after Tortorella was fired. I've also heard some people say Pittsburgh after Sullivan was fired, so we'll have to wait and see on that. When it comes to Anaheim, it seems like Joel Quenneville has also been interviewing as a potential head coaching option in Anaheim. That's an interesting option for me. I thought the Ducks might go with someone else. There's still a couple of other guys interviewing right now, but Quenneville in Anaheim would definitely be an interesting one. When it comes to Vancouver, not exactly sure who could be some of the front runners right now. I've heard about Malhotra, who I think is one of their coaches in the AHL right now. There's also some talk about Cooper, but it sounds like he'll be staying in Tampa. When it comes to Seattle, not sure who they could go after. When it comes to Chicago, there was some talk they were interviewing David Carlisle, who was a really good NCAA coach, but Carlisle turned down the Blackhawks offer, so I don't know who the leading candidate would be for Chicago right now. Also don't know who the leading candidate for Boston or Anaheim would be, so we'll still have to wait and see on this. I will be updating the coaching searches when news breaks over the next couple of trade rumor videos until some of these teams finally get their new head coaches. But I basically just wanted to break down the coaching situations as it sits right now and where all these teams who make coaching moves both in season and just after season ended sit right now. So definitely that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I left you guys thoughts. Are you surprised that the Penguins fired Sullivan, the Ducks fired Cronin, Tocchet walked away from Vancouver? Are you surprised that Bylsma and Laviolette only stayed 1 year in Seattle, New York? Definitely let your guys' thoughts on all of that. And who do you think will be the new head coaches of the 7 remaining vacancies right now? Definitely let your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're legend, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do this without you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, and don't forget to comment down in the comment section below. It really helps with the channel, and we're on the road to 500 subscribers. I also have a blog to make news, rumors, analysis, stuff for that, so check that out. I've linked that down in the description below. Cannot wait to see you guys all for next video, and I will see you guys soon.